Hello again. This will be my final video for the 1060 video series of vectors in C++. And here we're not just looking at vectors, but we're looking at vector iterators, in other words, pointers to elements of vectors. So to begin, we're going to do some basic stuff. Using a for loop, can we use an iterator to pass through each element of a vector and print it out? So in here, we're going to make a new notebook, example 1. We'll need to include vector, we'll need to include IOStream, and we'll use the standard namespace. Okay, so let's make a vector of numbers. Keep it simple. My vector is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, to make an iterator, instead of saying int I, I'm going to stop right up there. I'm actually going to say I want a iterator through a vector of integers. So vector of integers, iterator, and I will call it IT. And the initial value of it will be the beginning of my vector. I want to go while the iterator is not pointing to my vec.end. Once it reaches the end, that means it's gone past all the elements I'm looking at, and I don't want to do anything anymore. And because it is a iterator, it is a pointer, and I can just say plus plus. And similarly, because it is a pointer, to dereference the value that's there, I can simply say dereference the iterator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a messy looking line. And there are ways to write this a little bit shorter, but the important things to note here are that the iterator comes out of the integer vector, so you need to declare that it's integer vector first. Each iterator has to be specific to a kind of vector. You need the double colons in between them. You need a name for your iterator, and the starting value should be begin because that's the very first element that's there. If you change begin to something else, say begin +1, you'll see that it skips the first one because, again, these are all just pointers, and so you can increment them or decrement them as you choose. Since the pointer is going through, eventually it'll reach a spot where it's pointing to myvec.end. Myvec.end is the address of the space after the final element. So once it is pointing here, we have gone to the finish. And the iterator goes up by 1 every time, just like we expect. Okay, so that's it for the basics. Let's do some more advanced stuff. Okay, over here. Write a function that takes 2 vectors of the same type as parameters. Modify the second vector to add all of the first vector's elements in order starting at the front of the vector. So if I have vectors 2, 1, and 7, 9, it should leave 2, 1 as it is, but change the second vector to be 2, 1, 7, 9. Let's try it out. Duplicate, rename. Okay, here we go. So my function, we can call it perhaps, now it's not going to return anything, it's a void function, and we'll say mod second vec, and it's going to take 2 vectors of the same type as parameters. So we'll say vector int v1, vector int v2. Okay. Now, I need to modify the second vector to add all of the first vector's elements in order to it. And to do this, I'm going to need a function which is insert. Insert has 2 parameters. One is an iterator that points to an element of the vector, and the other is the value I want to insert. And I want to insert just before the element specified by the pointer. So if I do insert of n-1, this means literally insert before the last element. Okay, so we're going to need this insert function to do what we want to do here. And my goal is that I want to insert everything from the first vector in front of vector 2. So let's say that I do this. Now, let's say that you didn't think too much about it and you just tried to go through the first vector and insert everything at the front of the second vector. Let's see what happens. So for int I in v1, so I do v2.insert. Where is the iterator I want to put it in? I want to put it at v2.begin, at the beginning. And what do I want to insert? I want to insert I. Okay. Now if I do this, I'm going to say mod second vec. And let's get 2 vectors going on here. So this is my vector. We'll do v1 v2, and we'll just make the second vector double the first one, or 10 times the first one. So v1, v2, and then v2. And what I see is, whoops, I did mean that. Let's run all the code from the top, huh? Okay, so right now I see nothing is happening, and the reason for that hopefully should be obvious. We need to pass by reference. Let's run it all from the top. Okay, now we're on the right track. However, you can see we added everything in the wrong order. Instead of adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've added 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is not quite right. So what we need to do is we can't actually be adding them in this order, because by doing so, we're putting in the numbers in the incorrect order. What we should do instead of using this shorthand is use our normal way of writing our for loops. So I is 0, I is less than v1.size, I plus plus. Now this is how we would do things to go from front to back, but we actually want to go from back to front. So instead we should say int I is v1.size minus 1, so that's the last element. We want to go as long as I is greater or equal to 0, and we want I to go down. And this way what we're going to do is we're going to start by inserting the last element. So we'll insert the 5 first, which will go right before the 10. Then we'll insert the 4, which will go right before that, and so on in reverse order. And by doing so, we get, whoops, let's run it from the top. Oh, I made a mistake here. Oh, I'm missing some parentheses right there. There we go. And now I have my numbers, except I am not. I messed something up, which is I shouldn't be inserting I should be inserting vector 1 of I, which will give me the correct values. And there we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and of course v1 has not been modified. There we go. So a few tricks to this one that we had to keep in mind, making sure we insert the right values, using an iterator to grab the first spot, and not only inserting, but also inserting in reverse order to make sure that the elements are put in the correct positions. So there we have it. Let's see if we can move on to the next one. Okay. Erasing. So, like insertion, we have erase, and erase also needs an iterator to point to an element that's going to be erased. We're going to write a for loop that uses an iterator to go through a vector starting at the beginning and erasing the element pointed to by the iterator in each loop. And we're going to see, does this delete all of the elements? So let's duplicate this into exercise number 3. Here is our problem. Get rid of this. So here's our vector. We want to write a for loop that uses an iterator. So for vector of integers iterator, it is going to be v1.begin, while the iterator is not equal to vector 1.end and iterator plus plus. And we want to erase what the iterator is pointing to. And let's see what happens to v1 if we do that. We have a problem. What is the problem here? Well, we can actually see it perhaps if I put in a print statement. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but we'll try. So let's say I push out what the iterator is pointing to each time, just out of curiosity. So what's happening here? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is what we should see coming up. But what do we see? We see 1, 3, 5, 5 again, and then a whole bunch of gibberish here. Something weird is going on. The first thing we notice is that this is clearly an infinite loop. We did not actually make it to the end to stop, and that's a problem. So one thing we can do to fix that is we can say we want to go as long as the iterator is less than the end. That way we're actually going to reach a stop. Remember that these are all pointers, they're all addresses, which means they're just an increasing value. So if we stop when it's less than the end, then we should be okay. So if I do that instead, you can see it still didn't work. It prints out 1, 3, and 5, which are the things that got removed, but it left 2 and 4 behind. Why did it do that? Well, the reason that it did that is that if you look at what's actually happening here, we delete the 1, which means that the 2 gets shifted over, and we move on to the next one, which is now 3. We delete the 3, move on to the next one, which is 4. but that gets shifted over. So now we're looking at the 5. The 5 gets deleted, and we finish. However, that 2 and 4 got skipped. And the reason they got skipped is because after we delete, we shift everything in the vector over one space, and we increment our iterator. We do not want to do both. What we should do is we should actually not do an I++ here. We should actually just do nothing. And now, you can see it actually deletes each and every one of them that's there. So we don't always want to increment this iterator, especially in the case we just want to delete everything. And that will get us our solution. Okay, one last one, and that will be our final exercise for the semester. So last exercise. Write a function that prompts the user to continuously enter pairs of strings, pairs of names, which are strings, and grades, integers, until they enter stop. Store all of these into vectors and output each pair. So this shouldn't actually be too difficult. Let's give it a try. Okay, so I want a function that is a void function, get names and grades, which also takes no parameters. And we're going to have a string input. And we'll also have a int grade. So our string input's going to be the names that they type in, followed by the grades. And we'll do a while true loop. Prompt the user to say enter a name or stop. Stop to stop. And we'll read in their input. If the input is stop, then we will break. We're done. Otherwise, we will say, okay, we're gonna need some vectors, right? So let's get a vector of strings called names and a vector of integers called grades. So if they entered a proper name, then our names should push back their input. And then we can say enter the grade for the name. And we'll put that. We actually don't even need a variable for that. We can just put it directly into our. Or I suppose we can put it here. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll read in what they type and put it in grade, and then we will say grades dot pushback the grade. And we repeat this process over and over until they say they stop. And when they stop, we will get the names and we will get the grades. Let's try it out. Okay, what did I mess up? Unknown type name names. I think this is the problem I had previously, which I ended up figuring out what the issue is, which is that this Python interpreter really hates string vectors. I'm not quite sure why, but specifically when I'm using the standard namespace. So I'm actually going to specify for it that these are from the standard namespace, and I think this may actually fix it. Oops. Let's run it from the top. Nope, there's still another problem. What is the problem here? Oh, duh. it's I can't do names and grades because they're only here in the function, so I need to write some loops to print them out. So for string name in names. And in fact, actually what I want to do is I want to do I is 0, I is less than names dot size, I++, because I actually just want to print out each pair. Name, names I, grade, grades I. There we go. And I think we don't actually need to have these here. It should be fine without it. Try it again. Okay, so now that I have that, I should be able to say get names and grades. So enter name, Michael, Ooh, we have a problem. So, why do we have a problem here? The reason we have a problem here, I do believe, goes back to the fact that we are reading in strings and integers. And so because I am, the fact that I'm using cin a whole bunch of times is actually causing some issues with regards to reading in the text. We do have a way to fix this, which is, if I'm not mistaken, cin.ignore, which should cause us to fix any issues that we potentially may have with anything hanging on inside of the user input. I'll put that in both spots, just in case. Let's try this again. Michael. Hold up, why is it not prompting me? It should at least tell me something, right? Hello. Okay, something wacky is happening here. Okay, why do we have this problem? What if I remove these, and let's say I use getLine instead. GetLine. GetLine cin into input. Actually, what I think I can do is the following. A little messy, but it should work. Let's try this. Instead of reading directly into grade, let's read into input. And we can actually set the value of our grade to be convert string to input of our input. Let's try this out. See, I don't like this. It's still not printing things, which is a bad sign. Let's stop this. Yeah, kill the kernel. Let's do this, now do this. Okay, there we go. Enter a name. Michael. Alice. Okay, didn't like this. Let's see if we can do something better. I think that might be from a different language, so it doesn't work. How can I convert a string into an integer? Well, I suppose I can cheat. I can look it up. Not really cheating, I suppose, because most programmers would probably do the same thing. So C++ string to int. What do I do? Help me out. The function I'm looking for is... oh, see, but this is what I used and didn't like that. Perhaps I can... Do you have something better here? No, that seems to be what it's using. Okay, well, let's give it another shot. Maybe there's just some other problem that's here. What was it? Grades equals standard stoi. Oh, I know what the problem is. Duh. I entered Alice as a grade for Michael. You can't do that. Let's put that back. I think it was actually okay. Run it again. Michael, the grade for me is 10. Did I actually have this right the first time? I think I probably did. What if I don't do the, so now I want to actually check, do I need to actually do this conversion, or can I actually just do this and this is okay? Let me see. Maybe the case that I just wasn't paying attention, I was inserting things I shouldn't insert. So Michael, 100. Yeah, okay, so this was working fine actually. 50, Bob, 70, Mohammed, 99. Stop. Hey, look at that. It was working the whole time. I just wasn't paying attention to what I was typing in, and no wonder it was causing all kinds of issues, because the grades I was entering were words, which doesn't work. So hopefully that wasn't too embarrassing. So fortunately we figured it out, and now we have our solution. So this will continuously type things in, and as we type things in, we see that the names and grades are being stored in both the vectors, and we can print out the contents of these vectors in order at the end. Hooray! So that wraps it up. Thanks for watching this video series. Let me know if it was actually useful, because if it's not useful, I probably won't do more of them. But if it is, please feel free to share with your friends, and I will hopefully see you in class. Take care and have a great time.